in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity, tomorrow never certain. What was behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking, with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
And there you have it indeed, ladies and gentlemen. How's it going, Dr. Thunder?
What's happening, man?
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Getting This Done. It is Wednesday. It is 6:30. That's Pacific time. I can never get that thing right. It's like for me too, like East and West, like West feels like East and East feels like West. So I always have to stop and think about it. For some reason, this feels like it's not right. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for clicking that like button as you come in. Hit the subscribe button if you have not, and the notification bell. Today we're talking about tests, okay? Tests, the ways in which we discriminate, right? The ways in which we assess if these don't have egalitarian outcomes in racially now. Is the test by definition racist? Are you saying therefore that these people suck, right? Dr. Thunder, you're saying these people suck, you're saying they're less than, then there must be something wrong with the test then. After all, there are different ways of testing, right? We do know that there are different ways of testing, so why don't we try to find the one that has blah, blah, blah? We get the idea. That's what we're going to be talking about today, Dr. Thunder. I want to ask you, you obviously, what is the process of recruiting people and also testing them when it comes to your students? You recruit people for the jazz program, you assess them, you have that improvisation class, which you've warned me never to take, neither me or any of my, the future generations will stay away from that class. So how do you select and assess? And do you have a racial, shall we say, impetus or reason for wanting to find something? You get what I'm saying, right? So how you balance all that then?
Yeah, Dusties don't do good in my improv class. So Kaizo probably shouldn't take it either. Anyhow, I mean, I do have certain recruiting goals in mind. In the number of students and the quality of the students, and in my support of Black men and boys. I am definitely aware of certain issues that we tend to disproportionately face and how that impacts our academic performance. And I'm able to ascertain the difference between a student that may have had some academic trouble, and or a student that went to a school district that didn't really have, the music classes, in particular music theory course that would make them more prepared for the sort of entrance exam within the School of Music, so that they can potentially place out of a class, or at least they don't have to take this sort of remedial class, or so that they don't get placed on one of the regional campuses instead of the main campus, which is another way that, the institution sort of handles that. And I always share my own sort of academic journey with students that I think, are potentially could have trouble, or I'm recruiting them, but their ACT score is not where it needs to be for the institution to take them, or whatever. And I'll say, look, your academics right now are not strong enough to get into the main campus. Now you have a few recourses. Anybody in the state of Ohio is allowed to go to the institution I work at. They're allowed to go there, but they may not get in the on the main campus, right? So they may have to, prove themselves academically at a regional campus. And then once they've actually proved themselves, then we know that they can do the work at the college level. So then no more are stuff like standardized test scores an issue. In my own journey, I've actually never taken any of those tests. I didn't take an ACT, I didn't take an SAT, and I didn't take a GRE, though I have 2 graduate degrees. Right? Now, the way that worked, one of them was, it just happened to be that the policies changed. But I went to a junior college. Shout out to CGA. So community college, right? I went to a community college for a year, and I proved that I could handle work at the academic level. I didn't actually plan to go to college. I didn't want to go to college. I was just going to do music, and then that was it. And then after the first year of, yes, a lot of writing and recording and touring and doing all this stuff, even after all that, I was like, well, let me see what this school thing is about. So my dad made me a deal, and he said, I'll reimburse 100% of an A, 80% of a B, and I'm not subsidizing C's. So that was the deal. So I got 100% reimbursement because I wasn't messing around. And then after that first year, I transferred into a 4-year institution, right? And that was a full scholarship. Once I got to the 4-year institution, all of my schooling was paid for because my academics were strong and because I was very talented, especially for, I was a talented student. I was the kind of student that schools recruit. When I went to college, there were several schools. I had several offers from different programs. So I'm saying all that to say that there's several different paths to school that don't necessarily require standardized testing or scoring very high on standardized tests. I've had a number of students that, for whatever reason, they were very bright, they were very intelligent, but for whatever reason, they just didn't do well on those tests. And it wasn't like they tried it one time. They just were not good test takers. Some people are not particularly good test takers. That's not an indication.
Have you noticed any kind of distribution with regards to test taking abilities in different groups? Let's say you notice, I noticed that the Black kids are disproportionately represented in the not being good test takers group, or something like that, or it's just on an individual by individual basis.
Well, it's interesting because both some of the highest ACT scores from students I've recruited and some of the lowest ones have been Black kids. So it seems to be more related to either the school system that the student came from, or just that the particular person either has a knack for taking tests or is just not good at it. I had a student that years ago that was, he had all of the pedigree, to, get a 36 or something on the ACT. All of the pedigree, dad's a physician, super high achieving academically, and all of that, and no nonsense family structure, yes sir, no sir, private schools, all of that. He had all that. He just was not a great test taker. That's just, and sometimes that happens.
Yeah, for sure. Let me acknowledge these
Yeah.
super chats real quick. There was the very first one up top. Shout out to Kaizoran Empire for the 84 cents, I believe you calculated.
Yes.
In Kenyan shillings, it's 100. Thank you very much. And we got Hakeem throwing down as well. That's much appreciated. And then Kaizoran Empire coming back. And the
That'll
battle
be $1.68.
that was 68. And the battle has begun, ladies and gentlemen. So now, I like what you're saying here in the sense that you're saying that there are many paths to the top of the mountain. And insofar as people, either as individuals or as groups, may be ill-prepared in one particular regard or the other, test-taking ability or academics, being in a particular neighborhood where you did not have the programs and such, that rather than change the test such that it produces egalitarian outcomes, right? Just whatever this academic test thing that you're not able to, contend with as a result of these disparities you mentioned, change that. You're saying like, hey, it may be better. You didn't exactly say this. You're saying, hey, it might be better to just have all these other different avenues, right? And acknowledge that, hey, you're not good at the testing yet, or for whatever reason, or you're not doing that good, or blah blah blah. Remedial / other paths is actually better rather than try to turn down or mess around with tests. So now that was just me commenting on what you said, but is it have you seen, because the question of is it possible for a test to be racist? Yes. Okay. Any test that produces egalitarian outcomes, that's one thing. Some of those tests might actually be producing the unegalitarian outcomes because they're actually, asking certain types of questions that are biased or whatever the hell it may be, right? So that is possible, right? We're not asking possible questions here. Almost everything's possible, okay? But do you, from a political stance or a temperamental stance, do you seek to interrogate tests that don't have an egalitarian outcome and ask, hey, why are we doing this? Let's take, for example, can you change your parameters, like you make it less mathematically rigorous or something, or less analytical? And we're about to play a video. Shout out to Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter here. Okay, which the kind of that sparked this conversation was this. But anyways, change, make that class, the improvisation class, maybe less, divided into two groups, where one group, it's not so rigorous in a particular way, and then in the other group, you can go through all that rigor. Where for example, you can take any sciences and you reduce down the mathematics, the level of analysis, the analytical rigor of it, and still get good outcomes and these types of things, right? The question is rather jumbled and all over the place, but
well, let me respond. Actually, I think that's an interesting analogy you're drawing with the improvisation class, because I created the existing improvisation sequence, and now I've since sort of assigned a couple of the classes to other teachers, and of course the curriculum belongs to the teacher, so they can teach what they want to teach using what materials they want to teach. I've encouraged a certain kind of at least a trajectory of the courses, right? So the first course is the beginning course, then there's an intermediate course and an advanced course. And of course, I've taught all of those courses. Now so in the first class, because you have both instrumentalists, and I've had vocalists in there also, and then you have percussionists, right? So much of the material is harmonic in nature, right? So So the first course, I have the percussionists play keyboard or play mallets, vibraphone or something, and they have to play all the same material. In the second course, they still have to play all of the same material. But once we get to the advanced course, there's a separate section of the course. It's all taught together, but I have a separate syllabus for that course where they play on, drum set, and I give them some other material, which is not the advanced harmonic material, right? Because you want to develop different sorts of things in a percussionist than a pitched instrumentalist, as it were. You want to develop different skills. And so an advanced drummer is going to have different skills than an advanced piano player or saxophone player, and will be therefore challenged differently by the material. So in a matter of speaking, though, I said, you at least need to be able to do improv 1 and improv 2, just like everybody else. So if that means that you got to struggle and you got to, and it's harder for you than for other people, I don't care. That's the gig. But when we get to the third class, then I adjusted the calculus, because it makes more sense to give the student an opportunity to develop more on their primary instrument, right? They've developed enough fundamental understanding of harmonic principles associated with improvisation at that point, at least melodic and harmonically, as far as that goes. So anyhow, so no, I don't necessarily think that we should come up with a different test. Yes, I acknowledge that it is possible for some of the tests to have sort of questions that may be somewhat biased. However, what doesn't matter is I don't know that bias matters or not, because in the real world, in the working world, in college, the same biases that would be present in the test would be present in where you'd have to work and where you'd have to go to school. And so unless you are capable of being able to deal with whatever the bias means, it doesn't matter. And, I think my dad got like a perfect score on those tests. He took all of those standardized tests. And of course there was bias then, and they had all the same arguments, but it didn't matter. He still crushed the score. He still crushed the test. So I
think that the video that we're going to play right now, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, as you come in, click that like button, okay? And share. And by the way, Kaizo says he's winning. Let's go ahead and share that super chat. Okay, Hakeem, if you're listening, Kaizo just dropped some more, right? He says he's winning. Dr. Thunder, you asked a question up here about what do you recognize what's on the screen?
Did you take an acuplacer? No, I didn't take an acuplacer. I took no standardized tests. I bypassed any need to take any ACT or SAT when I was in high school, because I just went to community college where you don't take an ACT or an SAT for that. I took enough classes to convince my 4-year institution that I could do the work at the college level. I had a 4.0, and then I went to the same institution for my master's degree as my undergraduate degree, and so there was no GRE required. And then years later, when I decided to go back to get the doctorate, they had changed for a doctorate in music. They had changed the sort of GRE requirements for the institution. They say it doesn't make any sense to evaluate a musician that has already achieved a master's degree a GRE, which has nothing to do with what they're going to study for a doctorate in music, because you know, as the degree gets higher, you get more specialized, more specific. So so long as you have basic language skills and you know, basic comprehension and stuff, which there's no evidence to suggest that you wouldn't have that if you already have a master's degree. And in my case, I was a tenured professor by the time I decided to do a doctorate. Mm-hmm. So, you know.
Shout out to Hakeem. He just dropped $10 on your head. So I think that he's gonna get the Dusty East African is gonna get crushed. The Dusty East African is gonna get crushed. So let's get into this video, and I think that this video is gonna perhaps talk about people, you know, below the dizzying heights from which your dad crushes all tests in front of him. Okay, there are people down here where the differences actually matter in the question, right? So let's see what those differences might be. In other words, if someone is saying that the test is racist, well, how is it racist? In other words, other than the fact that it is producing not egalitarian outcomes, whereby each race is represented in the way that you would expect them to be, other than that fact, how? What is the mechanism? Let's break it down. Let's look at it, right? That's what you would expect. So let's see at least any plausible ways. Glenn Lowry is always good for coming up with these possible arguments that certain people may be making, even though they're not as skilled at Glenn at saying it. So let's find out. What is this
Kaizo,
here?
Yeah, Kaizo, he's trying to crush. He's trying to crush the he doesn't want to be labeled as Dusty anymore.
This is $100 super chat.
Well, let me no. I gotta verify. I need to verify.
Well, $84 or something like that.
Wait, hold up. I gotta. It's wait a minute. Is it 10,000? It's 10,000, right?
Yeah.
Okay, hold up. Let's see here. Let's see, what is it? $83.88.
Yeah.
Yes.
Roughly 84.
That is a respectable. Winning. That is a respectable.
Yeah, let's
super chat.
Get a Don DeMarco for the respectable chat. Don DeMarco. You know, the East African was called to question, and
turns out the hoes ain't winning.
Okay, well, what is it? Oh, now he put a small one. He put another. Oh, wait, hold on. Whoa. That's Hakeem.
No, that's Hakeem.
What's going on
Hakeem.
here?
Oh, snap.
Jesus Christ.
That's $100 super chat.
All right.
Let's go. Let's go. Hey, wait a minute. And then we got let's see, African millennials in here. So African Canadian $69.90.
All right.
Hold up here. Let me check that. Let me check that. I got to check the 69 here.
Yeah, the Canadian, right? Because I think she might be beating the rest of these.
Yeah.
All right, another $100. Well, 83 and 89 cents.
$53.29 was the Canadian, and then snap, Canadian, another $84. Kaizo, let's go.
Okay, cool.
Let's go. Daddy needs a new pair of shoes. Let's go.
There you go. Much appreciated.
Very much appreciated.
Okay, we're the Glenn Show. We're the Black Guys. We're back. And John. We've already in the comments, people have already been commenting. Like, we didn't broadcast last week because we had a snafu. And so we're 1 week off schedule. We're just going to continue every other week from here. And we'll be doing the Q&A soon, within a week or so, for the month of August/September. But people are already commenting. I'm glad, they say, that you guys missed the week, because now you have the chance to discuss John's encounter on Twitter with Ibram X. Kendi. You want to tell us about that, John? And by the way, we should put up a link in the description of this post to the Twitter exchange between our own John McWhorter and the guy with 3 names, Ibram X.
You know, I wrote a piece.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I wrote a piece where I was just saying that there's this movement afoot among certain social workers to get rid of the standardized tests that they use for licensure for being a social worker, because Black and Latino people proportionally tend not to do as well on it. So there's the idea that because Black and Latino people don't do as well on it, the test is racist. And I just said that no, unless you can look at the test and say this question is biased against certain kinds of brown people. And nobody does that, at least not anymore, because you can't find any questions like that. You can't say that, then we have to get beyond this idea that it's just somehow immoral or uncivil to subject brown-skinned people to tests. It's not sophisticated. And what I was trying to do was not, like what I just said is like some editorial that would run in, I'm going to insult somebody, whoever it's something that would run in the New York Post, where you just say, they're not biased. But then I said, so nevertheless, Black and Latino people do tend not to do as well on the test. Why is that? And I was making the simple point that it's not a choice between thinking that there's something wrong with the test and thinking that Black people are dumb. I said it's neither of those things. What is it? And I talked about aspects of how language is used among people of different social classes, and how language is used can be very...
Boo, boo, boo. Racist talking points. You see, part of obviously what's going on is that, and then you can react in whichever way you will now. I mean, you may be familiar with Ibram X. Kendi, right? Ibram X. Kendi, Ta-Nehisi Coates, the usual people with 3 names. Michael Eric Dyson used to be in that crowd, but he's a little on the silly end of things. But basically, what John is doing here is saying, hey, how is the test racist? And then he's getting into some kind of subtlety about language use, where language on this end, on the lower spectrum, or with Black or whatever, is more rich, and richness tends to be contra-analytical, or shall we say contra-abstract by definition. Abstract is to be arid and less rich, okay, general, right? And at this point, my point I'm making, Dr. Thunder, is this. He already lost half the people, and including some of the people whom he may be thinking should have the intellectual curiosity or brain power to follow this, because he thinks that these people, quote unquote, are intellectuals that may want to go into and study the richness of the this. It's like, no, these people don't have the confidence. That's why when they get to that gate, they say that's racist, because they cannot see clearly into that. This is my hypothesis, right? It's almost like they cannot see clearly into this room that John is opening. Therefore, but they know it's a racist room, because why else would you go there, right? So they're like, hell with it. I can't see all this furniture you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. Is there any credence to what I'm saying, in the sense that the subtlety, the high resolution, and all this stuff, finding moving parts, finding handles, and shall we say, levers, and how this stuff moves, people don't have that resolution, and they're just going to come for him. Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's easier to it's easier to sort of blunt force trauma, rather than, be surgical about the way that you argue certain points. And when you're trying to argue with someone like John McWhorter, who is as nuanced, intelligent as he is, if you can't match that same sort of wit, then that's really all you have, is just sort of throwing rocks at the glass house, as it were. That's the only option that you have. And so, even if the person did have the cleverness to understand how to sort of unravel the sort of arguments being presented, due to the amount of nuance and detail and just information that he's presenting, even if they did have the capability of doing that, they actually may be better readers of the room, as it were. The people that would listen to this are probably going to be more persuaded by the blunt force trauma because they too don't have the nuance, the intelligence, the resources, the intellectual resources, the research and all of that to even understand, the particular argument that's being presented. It's like getting into an argument with someone and there's a particular point that they make and you're just trying to clarify what it is that is being meant by a particular word that's used. And rather than them accepting that and saying, okay, I see why that's important to be clear on that, they just say, they move the goalpost or start another argument, claiming that now you're being, you're being, I don't know. That's just semantics, whatever kind of meaningless kind of thing that people say.
Yeah, people forget the goal a lot of times. In other words, like there's a goal already set in front of us. Like this argument is to find out about X, and then they get in a side argument about the color of Winston Churchill's hat. When we're trying to find out who won the war or something.
Right.
They get into and they just get it's like they just get emotionally invested in that, and they literally forget. You see this on YouTube all the time. They literally forget what the conversation was about.
Right.
But yeah, so let us continue.
Well, and that's actually interesting because I think there is an interesting. It's interesting to me to allow a conversation to go places where you don't plan for it to go, and maybe even to address stuff that appears to be not essential, but in its own right is interesting, but you just can't allow that to derail you from the purpose of the conversation. Yeah. So.
Indeed. Yes. So basically, you're going back to the political animal argument, which is that these people are political animals. They're reading the room. If it was a monarchy, they will be out there in the court reading saying the right things for the king and his henchmen to be saying. In a democracy, right. They go for the lowest common denominator. They understand that, hey, the sledgehammer method, that these people don't understand what the hell is going on here. So I'm going to just keep this sledgehammer on you, John McWhorter, because you're going to muddy up the waters on these people that I got the game sewn up over here. I've sold them the bill of goods. You're just coming here muddying the waters. There's no point to this, and all that kind of stuff, which is intellectually dishonest and all that. Because I do find that, because what I find is, there are ways of making their arguments, let's say, right? After letting John McWhorter, or even using the matter that John McWhorter presents. John McWhorter says, let's open up the culture aspect and look at the culture of this and the culture of that. And let John McWhorter say all he wants, and I can still make my argument. Because my argument, especially if it's a political one, has to just be, value-based, right? That yes, I understand that this is what the nature says, and this is what the logic suggests, and all that kinds of stuff. But I'm making a political determination based on this political value, call it freedom or equality or whatever, right? And that I think that therefore we must do X, Y, or Z. In other words, yes, for example, your test is objective, but if it gives me unegalitarian outcomes, it may cause social unrest. As a result, I want you to change your test such that there's a more egalitarian outcome, right? I don't mind arguments like that, right? You know what I mean? Just tell me, like, hey, this is what I actually am. Because I understand there's such a thing as human beings and social unrest and political considerations, right? I'm not some kind of idiot. But why make anyways, let's play the video before I get shout out again. Thank you very much, everyone, for the watching, participating, liking, sharing, subscribing, notification bell, and the super chats that you guys have been so generous with. Okay, we're going to end that poll soon to see what you guys say about a test that produces unegalitarian outcomes being essentially racist or not. Take it, John McWhorter.
Very rich in working class culture, but it doesn't prepare you as well for the abstraction of tests as the way language is used among middle class people. I used a classic.
We'll pause him here, go backwards a little bit. Basically, he's talking about the differences in the language and the culture. Like, hey, there's this thing dance he's doing between rich language, contextual language, in my street and my house, and this person and that person, and all the subtleties type language, which is kind of contra, again, analytical. It's different from something that can be easily abstracted from and generalized, right? That it's not about your street and your house, it's about this particular statistic about this group. And it doesn't matter what you saw, your experience. You know, people talk about their lived experience a lot, for example, which again is contra analytical, contra abstraction, right? Because abstraction wants to abstract from all this richness of whatever and give me some through lines and some and such, saying that, hey, you know, cultures that are steeped in context and such may not be training themselves well for taking tests which are based on these types of abstractions and whatnot. But let him put it in his own words.
Used can be very rich in working class culture, but it doesn't prepare you as well for the abstraction of tests as the way language is used among middle class people. I used a classic study from the 1980s, a woman, an anthropologist who studied a white middle class culture, a black working class culture, and a white working class culture, and came to similar conclusions about the two working class cultures. And so I was just saying that the problem that we have is that kind of working class linguistic culture is wonderful in many ways, but it doesn't prepare you well for the abstraction of these tests. And so I stressed, and I'm almost done. I stressed, there's not anything wrong with anybody. I said, I am not calling out black culture. I said it twice in the piece. And then I also said in the piece, this is also true of white working class people. So then here comes Ibram X. Kendi. And Henry Rogers.
Damn, he's like, I'm not even gonna call you by your fake name. I don't think I've ever seen John. This is John upset right here.
Yeah, right.
It's like Henry Rogers. Like, yeah, typically he's respect, you know. Anyways, let's see what Henry Rogers says.
Basically writes this long thread because, you know, the Atlantic, I'm sure, won't let him, you know, write the article he probably wants to write about me in the Atlantic. I'm sure they won't let him. So whenever he gets mad at me, he does some long Twitter thread. And he writes that I say that I'm not criticizing black culture, but then I go ahead and do it because I said.
So let me imagine what Ibram X. Kendi is saying here, whereby John is saying, I'm not criticizing black culture. I'm just going to abstract certain things such as the richness of a particular type of conversation. I put it in a class structure, which he did, talk about lower class type stuff and all that kind of richness that doesn't necessarily prepare you for the for test taking. You see, Ibram hears that as, so you're saying that they're bad, right? It's like, you're telling me you're not saying they're bad, but you just told me that they're bad because you're saying that the thing that they're doing doesn't produce these good outcomes in this test. It's like, no, I'm saying that they are square and they don't fit in this round cup. And you're like, oh, so that means they're bad, right? Isn't that what Ibram, is that what the thing is that's going on here?
That's exactly what's going on. And I wouldn't be that. See, I don't think that McWhorter had to be as generous with, you know, suggesting that he's not being critical of black culture. Because I think you can be critical of black culture and still not be saying that somehow the black people taking the test are inferior. Therefore, that's why they're doing poorly in the test. Right? You could just say there's certain features of black culture that are, you know, create a disproportionate, you know, lack of support for students that are of a certain aptitude level. For instance, going to public schools. The really bright, smart kid has to sit by Thuggo, that already has 2 baby mamas, and he's just a sophomore in high school. So I think you can. I think you can be critical of the culture, of the dysfunction in the culture, and still not be suggesting that black people are low IQ or something.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's
yeah,
not.
so
It's
you-
not a.
yeah.
I mean, this is not a Kaiserian Empire strain. It's John McWhorter.
It's John McWhorter. Yes, and he didn't have to be that generous. And he has, he writes for the Atlantic, and it does. I think he has a regular column now in the New York Times, and he's got all that New York Times money, by the way, to kind of drag us into the mud a little bit here. Got all that New York Times money, and now he's got a new girlfriend. I think he had a white wife before, and now I think he has a new white woman. But that's how scandalous! Like what the hell? What's wrong? I like John McWhorter and whatever, but this is true. This is true. Moving up in the world, and he got a new Russian model one. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue.
Said, disproportionately in even some black middle class culture, because of cultural lag, which is universal, there is that old school way of using language, and that lag is something understandable in any culture. And I am not saying it's a flaw, but the question is how you usher a culture into the new ways. Kendi doesn't get that.
Yeah, on my reading of his reaction, it is, if it's a detriment to the performance, it is a flaw with the culture. You're trying to have it both ways. You're trying to say the culture doesn't prepare people to do well on this particular kind of test. Then you're trying to say there's nothing wrong with the culture. Well, he thinks that's just a contradiction.
Right. And that doesn't make him insane, but it does, frankly, make him a poor reader. I'm sorry. Because I anticipated people thinking that way, because it's a fair thing to think at first. And if you read the piece, I make it very clear that I am not finding fault. And if he thinks that my saying there's an aspect of the culture established in the past that is disconsonant with the requirements of modernity right now, if what he hears in that is me dissing black people, what that is crude. It means that he doesn't understand sequential reasoning. And I'm sorry to say that about him, but that thread was almost willfully
Did you say something?
Yes, it's the sledgehammer.
Yeah, it's basically the sledgehammer. And here, Dr. John McWhorter is continuing with the sequential thing, because in this particular way, let's talk about what the scalpel is and what the sledgehammer is here. Basically, he's just saying, hey, look, you have this particular type of culture from the past. And the reason why he put it in a class structure, okay? But when you're coming from, we know the background, right? We need not go over slavery and Jim Crow and redlining and all that kind of stuff, right? So, and that you're going to have a residual effect in the culture, in the language, staying in this whole kind of richness versus abstraction type of playing field. And that is kind of continuing here now. And that is not to diss the culture, just to say, sequentially, blah, blah, blah. So it needs to be an adjustment to the times. And Ibram X. Kendi is coming in with a sledgehammer that says, no, you cannot say that anything was ever wrong in any particular time, because there's no, in other words, whenever you put, demarcations, put things in boxes and start moving them around on this plane, I'm looking at time and the changes of the environment, which, by the way, this is not just some kind of a fancy of mine. Evolution, in other words, the universe, the randomness in the universe makes it such that you do have to be able to look at changes in the environment and whether or not you are well suited for them at this particular time, right? Or whatever it is that you may be doing when you're in, what book is it? When I was young, I did think, which of the Gospels is that in? I'm sure you know exactly what I'm trying to quote.
Oh yeah, when I was young, I behaved as I was young, but when I became older, then it's in one of Apostle Paul's letters.
Yes, one of his letters. Sounds like him. Yeah. It sounds like him bloviating there. Now, this is a sequential type of thing, where sequential type of like, okay, I gotta change, I gotta adapt. And it's like, so it's not just some kind of like, oh, I want intellectual cleanliness. It's like, no, the universe is that way, man. It's throwing things at you. And now culture has shifted. Okay, cool. Now how does one adapt? It's like, no, you can never say that anything is out of sync or whatever, blah, 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 because Sledgehammer suggests that you're saying that that's bad. So it's, yeah, I think you put it quite right. Let me continue, unless there was something else you wanted to add with regards to what he has said so far.
No, let's keep going.
Comprehending. And the sad thing is, I know it's the best he can do. So that's what it was.
Ouch. That was a guy. It's like, it's like, hey, that's the best. Okay.
Say that about him, but that thread was almost willfully uncomprehending. And the sad thing is, I know it's the best he can do. So that's what it was.
Somebody
all he has
commented on his SAT score in the comments and responded. Did you see that?
I'm sorry.
I did not.
Apparently you can search for it and you can find it. And I am not giving this of my own account. I am only repeating what someone said in the comment, that there's evidence that his combined SAT score was about 1,000. That's about 500 on the verbal and on the math. That's near the median. It might even be below the median of the distribution of performance. It's definitely not particularly high.
He just called this cat a low IQ cat.
Yeah, well, or at least a bad test taker, right? I mean, because the thing is,
well, yeah, but yes, they're saying test taker, but maybe they're being a little bit guilty of the sledgehammer here too, because they're intentionally not being nuanced, and the smiles on the face indicate that they realize that most folks are going to take that to mean that it's an insult about a level of IQ.
Yeah. 100%. Because I mean, the intellectual crime is already evident in what has been described previously, right? This person is refusing to see certain things. He's doing the sledgehammer thing, right? And then if you go backwards and start looking at his SAT score, yeah, for sure. Or now that is a little bit of a burn because he's already taking a shit in the living room. That's my one cussing for the stream. I get to say one crazy word. So he's already done that crap, and I think that's enough. We need not go to his SAT score, right? But let's see.
I think he says that about himself somewhere. Actually,
okay.
To give him credit. Yeah, he doesn't like tests.
Comports with his position that the tests are not measuring very well the abilities of people, and that there's something wrong with the test, which is exactly what you're contradicting in your argument. He's saying, look, I'm smart. I have succeeded. I've written books, including books that have won prizes. I've gotten big grants. I'm a professor at the university. I have a following. I have an influence on the culture. You're telling me I'm not smart? I'm smart.
Which is the worst kind of, especially when these dumbasses do it. Okay. and again, this is a guy that's above average IQ, right? This Ibram X Kendi guy, because he has to be. But when you're doing these types of things, anyways, there's no need getting sidetracked by this.
And he's not saying this on my account. I'm just telling you what someone said about him. Maybe he said it himself. I don't know. He had a relatively unimpressive performance on the standardized test himself. Not everybody tests well. The tests don't measure our true ability. His default position is if you've got a big racial difference in the people who are proportion of people who are passing, given that we know that Blacks are just as capable as any other group, your default position should be to question the instrument, because the instrument is reporting back to us information that we know is not true based on our lived experience.
And this is the problem. That was a brilliant summary of his impression, including making him sound like the sane person that he is. But the problem is this: someone like him stops at the test is racist. Just stops there. It's like throwing down a gauntlet. He doesn't seem to feel any need to specify how is it racist. And that is frankly evidence of a certain kind of incuriosity, because frankly, anybody watching the discussion wants to know how is it racist? To not explain how the questions are racist today. And let's face it, nobody on those tests is asking what wine goes with chicken these days. It's nothing like that. So what is it? it's like if you read some story about you're at a zoo, and so you read that I walked by the walrus cage and I heard the walrus talk. So then I went and I told the zookeeper that the walrus was talking. The zookeeper tripped over his shoelaces and had to go to the emergency room. And then I remembered that I needed to go to the, and you're thinking, but wait, what did the walrus say? Why would you write that story about the walrus talking and not say what the walrus said? In the same way, well, the test is racist. How? And somebody like him never says that is an incomplete style of reasoning, and frankly, you wonder whether he could specify how. And then you have simple questions. Did I read the comments this time? I must admit that I did look at a fair amount of the comments, because what's interesting?
Yeah, because, it presumes that, to say something is racist presumes that you already know how, right? It's kind of like, so not stating how, that means that it's a feeling or political act, as you're pointing out. So anyways.
Interesting about this on Twitter, and I try not to do too much Twitter these days. I got more love on Twitter than him, and I did not get my love only from people who read the National Review. He got a trickle. I kind of won that one. And I found it interesting. One person was saying, so, okay, are spelling bees biased against non-South Asian people because of who wins them these days? And then the old question, is basketball biased against white people because black people are better at it? And the thing is, it's this incompleteness.
Yes.
People like Kendi never have an answer to that question. Maybe there's an answer. You could probably get into their head and come up with what their answer might be. Why is it different with tests? But they never even answer. And then they claim that it's racist to contradict them or to not think of them as great thinkers. It won't do.
Okay, I think a couple of things. I mean, I'm an economist. We have a PhD program. We teach students. We have a choice about how much technical emphasis to put in our curriculum, how much math, how much statistics, how much abstraction, versus how much more sociological and historical information to put in our curriculum. How does the society work, the economy fit within it?
In your improvisation class, okay, with regards to outcomes that you're trying to see, okay, do you think that level of rigor is necessary for the outcomes that you're trying to see? Or is the rigor about the skill that you think it induces, and then outcomes be damned or whatever? You can take it and be a Michael Jackson. I know I'm mixing up all kinds of shit right now. Or you might not be anything at all, but at least I've induced this skill with a certain level of rigor, right? And the reason why I asked is because previously too, you were also talking about, hey, at a certain level, it's skill, like in other words, practical, objective, and then later on, there's a little bit more breadth or wiggle room. And I was thinking, I'm probably the kind of person that will struggle initially. It's just actually my history, right? I struggle initially with things because they're presented in that way. Until that's my history with math. Until I got to calculus, it was kind of hard for me, because calculus is when they opened up the room and showed me what was really going on, and I was like, why the hell didn't you guys just tell me from the beginning? Like, what was all that? Because to me, algebra and all this arithmetic was just like, do this. It's like wax, like like wax on, wax off, right? It's like wax on, wax. I'm like, what is the wax? What is the? And then calculus showed me the wall. Or whatever it is we're trying to do, and then I was like, this is dumb. Anyways, so I understand that things have to be arranged in a particular way, because if it was arranged in the other way, I would have the advantage, right? If it was more freedom in the beginning, then someone is gonna have to have that advantage, and I'm fine, because I think that I'm more of an outlier. I'm not gonna overturn things for an outlier, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm cool. I'll struggle through initially. Once the bigger picture opens up to me, I'm fine. I said all that because it's kind of partially related to the question I'm asking you here about, is the level of rigor that you put in that class, does it have anything to do with particular outcomes, or is just the skills that it induces?
I think it's more about the skills, because so I tell I tell my students, this course is called Improvisation but really it should be called something like tools for improvisation, or skills, or developing skills for improvisation.
As abstracted, and this is just for me if I was in that class, right? As abstracted by you, right? And that you have a particularly rigorous frame of reference, and you're quite subtle and all that kind of stuff, and you have kind of abstracted these skills, and you're presenting it to me, and they're like, okay, cool, I get it. So go ahead.
Yeah, so that's sort of the thing. And so if they can develop the discipline, this, and therefore the skill, then they'll be able to use these tools that they've developed to more skillfully improvise, to say things that are more meaningful, that are more clearly related to the structures that they're manipulating.
And might even be more, shall we? And I'm about to say something that sounds contradictory to improvisation, but repeatable, because they're understandable, because they're understood, right?
And repetition is no. There's no. Repetition doesn't mean that it's not.
Yeah. Improvisation.
Right. Improvised. Right.
So
you could decide, because the people that are improvising, it's people, it's not robots, right? So personality does have something to do with usual choices that you'll make.
Yeah, I was trying to get, in my ongoing project of giving rhythm to the dusty East African, right? I was trying to give him some of these tips, because he wants to just go with the spirit, that dusty spirit that never comes, apparently for him. And I'm like, dude, no, I get it that when it's freestyle, you don't want to feel like you're cheating, right? I get it, right? And you know what I mean? You're a musician, so there's a place that you would rather be where it is more like you are still and watching yourself do the stuff. But you're not always gonna be there, right, Dr. Thunder, right? So you gotta have your cheat sheet and your things that you do, right? And I'm like, visualizing words in the stream, for example, going down like a list is a freestyle technique, obviously. So it's like sometimes you're flowing, but sometimes you got to pull out that list and start looking at it and going. Anyways, so it's about the skill that it induces. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue.
There are subfields in economics which are more or less demanding of technical specialization. So the people who want to do statistics as their main thing could specialize in mathematical statistics. The people who want to do a more, historically descriptive and rich kind of detailed account about the history of this industry or whatever, the emergence of that, they could do a less technical program. It turns out that if I were just looking at head counts on the graduate record exams mathematics part, there are not so many Blacks who do extremely well. Men are overrepresented relative to women amongst those who do extremely well on the quantitative. I could design my curriculum and my instruments of selecting graduate students to put less emphasis on the quantitative. It would change the field. It would make it a different experience. It would make for different kinds of dissertations, different kinds of research questions, de-emphasizing the mathematics and emphasizing the historical, social theoretic, philosophic, sociological dimensions of economic study. And if I did so, the scores, quote unquote, the relevant scores on the relevant tests of applicants would show more Blacks in the right tail, and I'd end up with more Black economists, more female economists, et cetera. So if a member of that group comes along and says, we're looking at the test that you use, we're looking at the outcome, and we are underrepresented amongst those whom you're selecting, we think that's unfair. We think it locks in historical privilege. We think it is a reflection of a particular, narrow, and arbitrary view about things. Here is another way of doing social work. Here's another way of doing economics. Here's another way of teaching people about society. that if you used those instruments would be more favorable in the selection process to our group, and we think that's justice.
Yeah, like my kind of argument that I was talking about, like there's nothing wrong with coming out with an agenda and saying, hey, here's the argument for my agenda. I would like to see more of X type of people there, and these are the reasons why it's a good idea, both politically and this and that. And by the way, I think they'll bring in more of this extra sauce here because by the way, here's a better way of doing things. All that kind of stuff. It's like completely open, right? That is the whole idea of politics and democracy and whatnot, right? But all this gaslighting that goes on is a bit insane. But I don't know if you wanted to make a comment, or I'll just continue playing.
No, let's keep going.
I think that's kind of what's being said here, although I don't think quite as clearly articulated. but the test is bad by virtue of the fact that it generates disparate results. It's just a way of saying the thing that the test is measuring should not be getting so much emphasis, because when you put the emphasis on that thing, you exclude our people. And if he or she, whoever is making this argument, were to put it that way, then we would get down to talking about, in my case, in the case of my example, exactly what is economics. Can we really discover the root causes of inflation by avoiding the immersion in time series econometrics, where you have to take masses of data and tease out causal relationships? Can we really solve the problem of how to regulate Silicon Valley or tech monopolies if we don't have complex, intricate game theoretic representations of the imperfect competition that goes on amongst those, and that kind of thing? And I think actually I can defend the contemporary practice of economics on those grounds, but that's where we would have to fight.
And the problem is that the people who make the kind of claims that you're making, and I think you are explaining exactly what's going on in their heads, exactly what they need, they never even broach this next part. The issue is, okay, if we didn't do it the old-fashioned way, would we lose anything? And I honestly think that what a lot of people are thinking, what a lot of those people are thinking is, well, we don't like numbers.
So John McWhorter here said something, right? So Glenn went through this whole, here are alternative ways. Let's say, take for example, okay, and let me go through it. I think it's worth it, right? In terms of John McWhorter established this basic dichotomy of richness in description of a culture and a language, right? A culture or language that's kind of rich with description and context and blah, blah, blah. And then on the other side, you have something that's more abstract, okay, and general. And it's not about, all the different people that you know from your street and your experiences and all that kind of stuff, but it's more, well, what are the statistics on XYZ group and such, right? That these things tend to be opposed to each other. And then Glenn is restating this thing and say, look, we emphasize on this mathematization, in this case of economics and analytical rigor. How about we bring in people who have more of this contextual richness stuff and make it more sociological and blah, 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 blah. And then becomes a question of trade-offs. And Dr. Thunder, you have anything to say about this trade-offs thing, and perhaps why people don't like talking about trade-offs? Because in the world of business, 100%, this is what business people have to do. You have to get down to the, what am I winning? What am I losing? What am I trading? Who's coming out on top, and all that kind of stuff. So, but it seems in the world of, quote unquote public intellectuals, especially when it's tinged with politics, the idea of trade-offs, of saying, okay, I can change it from this way to the other way. Here are the arguments for my way, that kind of thing. Here are the trade-offs. So do we lose anything by making it more sociological, more contextual driven, blah, blah, blah? Any comments on that?
Yeah, there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs.
Right? Thomas Sowell, the favorite. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. No solutions, only trade-offs. And often is the case that, so folks that are actually the ones that the buck stops with them, they actually have the authority, the will, the power to make changes, that refuse to make changes and always represent things as everybody can get what they want sort of scenario. There's enough to go around and represent things as though they are finite. They are infinite rather than being finite. The economy is an example of that. The supposed solution for all of the economic problems is to grow the economy. But the problem with that is that the economy at some point is finite. So it really is about what who are you going to serve, who is going to get tightened up, and who is going to be left out.
Yeah.
It
And
really
by
is.
the way, this point that you're making is this is why technology is very important, by the way. And what I mean by technology here, we have to define it in this sense as doing more with less, right? So it's like the economy is finite, but we got to grow the economy. The way you grow the economy is typically, I mean, it's always by doing more with less. Yeah, you can find ways of then digging more out of the finite part of whatever the hell it is, part of oil, part of coal, whatever. Find a way of digging more, but typically it's a better way of digging more with less effort. Blah blah. It's usually it's technology that closes this gap that you're talking about. Right? Economy has to grow, otherwise, we're going to kill each other. And the way that it actually does grow is by doing more with less. But anyways, go ahead.
Well, and my statement is not just about the state of the economy now. So I believe the economy can grow a great deal from where it is now. However, we still will get to a point when it cannot grow anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, that's when we have to start, that's when they have to start shuffling, and behaving as though there is some other principle that actually is tied their hands, that's causing them not to be able to make certain decisions. I've talked about this budget, the term budget, which is it's a sort of whipping boy, it's a scapegoat. But what often is the case is that people don't recognize that the scapegoat is actually placed there by the people using the budget excuse, right? So it's their goat. At any point in time they want to, they can just say, well, this is really what this is, and we're going to do this other thing. But you run into the same issue of the trade-off. So if I give you the bonus, the pay raise that you're asking for, that means that I can't give it to someone else. You can't just magically create more money. Well, unless you're the Fed and you just decide to print more money and then simultaneously steal from everyone that is holding your currency. But whatever. Hey, those are just details. You don't pay attention to that.
Nice,
hey, get on Amazon. You can get stuff for cheaper. You're good. You're fine.
If you're gonna steal, might as well be egalitarian about it, right?
If we didn't do it the old-fashioned way, would we lose anything? And I honestly think that what a lot of people are thinking is, well, we don't like numbers. We find all of that dry. It would be putting an awful lot of effort into something that we don't cotton to as much as we cotton to studying a history, rooting out injustice, writing about our feelings, writing about other people's feelings. And I'm sorry, but that's just not fucking good enough. And I think they expect us to intuit that and kind of all do high fives. No, that is a rejection of the Enlightenment and modernity and complexity.
Okay,
and
now we gotta stop. We gotta stop.
Have...
Okay, I understand, John. I have the same struggle. However, it's kind of like so if I went to I don't know, 4th grade, And I said, okay, you fourth graders, we are going to say I got for some random reason I happened to take up a fourth grade music class just for the fun of it, you know. I just have all this extra time. Maybe I go on sabbatical so I can teach fourth grade music class. And I come in there and I was like, you know what? We're going to use my improvisations, my improvisation syllabus that I use for college. And I'm using all of these terms and all of this theoretical stuff that they have no idea what I'm talking about. And just totally confusing them. And they can't even play their instrument yet. They don't even know how to put it together yet. And I'm talking to them about the, you know, intricacies of, you know, altered dominance, and, you know, I'm talking about, you know, the common practice period and how it has it's ubiquitous, it's in the ether, it is what everyone hears, so that even if you don't, you know, even study music, you know what this is, you know what common practice music it is, you know, Baroque period through the end of the Romantic period. You know, I'm talking like this and stuff. You know, they're like, what is going on here?
Did you say Baroque? The Baroque period? What?
Yeah, right. What you saying? Well, I don't have any money. You're racist. You know, I don't know. And somebody from one of the students in the class says, we don't know anything that you're talking about. Can you just make it, you know, can you just talk, you know, a different way? Can you know, or whatever? You know, look, I understand that it's hard often for people that have a high aptitude in a particular area where things are very clear as to be easy, too easy. They don't have to work for it. It just occurs to them. But often what happens is they will they'll confuse that for some amount of work that they have done to get them to that place, when in all actuality, yes, they did the work. I'm not taking that away from them, but they were always going to see things with a different level of clarity. And it's just, they always had an advantage. They always had an advantage. So it's like it's a condescension, not based on what it is that he's even saying. So he's insinuating that that his lack of satisfaction with this you know, the situation, this high-fiving and stuff, the lack of satisfaction with that is because he has worked hard enough to get to the place where he can comprehend things at a certain level, blah blah blah, and they're just too lazy to do the work to whatever. When in all actuality, he always had an advantage that made it so that he was going to be able to perceive things at a certain level when others just were not going to perceive them at that level, ever going to be able to perceive them, and no amount of effort was going to ever get them there. But then criticizing them because they're not able to get on his level. You see what I'm saying? So it's like it's almost the what I call the so it's the actual issue with the Pharisees. See so what the Pharisees did that often is overlooked is the Pharisees created a standard that they themselves would excel at, which didn't happen to be the same standards as others people would excel at, and then look down at others because they didn't excel at the same thing that they did.
Yeah.
Right? See, that's the actual issue there.
In the level of like, you know what, like I understand what you're saying. I'm often accused of the same thing. On the level of communication, let me start there first. When you talked about, communicating, and people like they don't know what you're talking about, right? Can you just say it in a different way? Now, the way I've countered that is now I have it's almost it's almost impossible for me to do certain things, but the way I have countered that is to say things in layers. And you may notice me, I'll say something visually, and then I'll say it in this way, and then I'll give a little story or whatever, and then it leads to maybe talking a little faster so that I can fit more into basically repeating myself, right? Just repeating myself. Okay, here's it in this way, here's it in this way, here's it in this way. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't work either, because it might actually be worse. Because what I'm doing is almost like, because I have an intuitive picture of the thing, so I'm kind of like showing glimpses of it in different things, but these traces these leaps I'm making these are vast leaps, For me, it's just this picture and then this picture, and I can see the reflection. But these are vast leaps in idea space, let's say, right? To someone who doesn't, it's not like intuitive that way. So I 100% get it.
You're describing it's like you're describing a picture that no one else can see, but since you can see the picture, you can speak abstractly about the picture and talk about any aspect of it, which you believe to be further elucidating, making it clear what it is that you're saying. But the only reason that you're able to do that is because you can see the picture.
Yeah,
and
so I'm just completely lost.
Really clarify.
Yeah, because it's worse. Yeah, and this is when typically people make the comments, and we're gonna land the plane here with this. That was a nice short video. I think I found the right length of video for us to spend an hour and a half on. Seems to be about like 12 minutes. Anyways, that's when people would typically say that I'm not saying anything. In other words, like I would say all these things, right? I'm thinking, here's this side of the picture, and here's this other side of the picture, and then usually you'll hear a comment like, "Oh, he's not really saying anything," So I've recognized that that's what that means. What they're perceiving is just kind of air. It's like, you haven't really said anything. You haven't said anything, bro. Mr. Kaiser over there, the silly thing he does is he starts making all these small arguments. In other words, like he packs all kinds of shit in there. He's the fastest talker of all of us, right? So he's saying all this stuff, and I'm sure he thinks, yeah, I'm telling him. It's like, bro, it's just what you're talking about. Anyways, we had a couple of polls, okay? And people, it seems, don't think that a test is necessarily racist just because it produces unegalitarian outcomes with regards to the results, okay? If you don't expect equal representation, and to say that there's something about the culture, let's talk about John McWhorter's argument, there's something about the culture that makes it such that it is not amenable, susceptible, whatever, to doing well in tests. It's not to criticize the culture, because after all, you're given a kind of a sequential type reasoning. It tends to be the case that we're fine with, let's say NBA players being dominated by a particular, group. The Kenyans winning all the races, and a particular type of Kenyan, not just even a particular tribe. We're fine with all that, especially when it's physical. Right? We say, okay, and I think this actually, the cognitive aspect, what I mean by that is people's reasoning ability is reflected in this fact. In other words, physical you can see, right? So it's not this abstract picture we were talking about, Dr. Thunder, right? Or John McWhorter's, the richness of language versus the abstract. It's like, bro, no one knows what the hell you're talking about. But hey, there's a Filipino guy, okay, he doesn't look like the Kenyan guy, so I'm fine with the Kenyan winning the race, right? It's like we're fine with that when these differences get displayed in this particular way. But when it gets into culture, that's a little too abstract. And hence, this is perhaps the advantage that the political animals that you talk about, Dr. Thunder, they have an advantage in this sense, which is they recognize that no one knows what you're talking about. Okay,
that's right.
And
that's
they come
right.
in with a sledgehammer, and they do that. But anyways, final thoughts, and also Thunder's thoughts, which you didn't have last week. So you're gonna go ahead.
Yeah. So I've got a Thunder's thoughts tomorrow, and it is this. Yeah, pump and dump versus abstinence. What's better for black men? And my guest it will be Edward Anderson.
Okay.
So
What you couldn't get
super.
Ramil himself to.
So it's going to be a good conversation. Eventually, I'm going to. My intention is to actually have a debate with Ramil on this topic. But this is going to be more in depth. I'll show some clips of, different stuff, and it's the full show with Simp Anthem of the Week and everything. So that'll be fun, and I've got some TikToks that I think will be interesting. It'll be good to riff with Edward, who is a fast talker himself. Very, very clear of thought and very articulate. He's a
Yeah. So Edward, because we were talking about that richness, and so Edward is one of the people that combines the two, right? Where aesthetically, in other words, the census, he does talk fast enough so that he can fit all the stuff he's trying to say, right? So it's not making you think by talking slow, right? Because when people lose track, typically the slower you are. But if you can fit, assuming they're paying attention and have numbers. Anyway, so he's got that going on where he can talk fast, number one. Number two, he has that richness in the context stuff, right? Where about, the grandmas in the 20s and my sister in the blah, blah, blah. And the mulattoes back in whatever, right? All that kind of stuff, right? He's good with that. But also he has a through line aspect, in other words, the analytical part, the abstract part, in terms of, understanding that he is making an argument. He was going somewhere, right? Blah, blah, blah. Now, granted, he never lands the plane, but, he does get to the city. Like, he flies to the city and just keeps circling the airport. So, that's Edward Anderson. You guys go ahead and check that out with Dr. Thunder's thoughts.
Yeah, tomorrow night, Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it'll be the full show with the pre-show, some great live music from a recent performance of mine, and then it'll get into a tasty monologue, some back and forth with Edward and I, right into Simp Anthem of the Week, TikTok theater, and then we'll have our main attraction, which is this pump and dump topic versus abstinence. Many believe that abstinence is not a realistic. It's not a realistic, it's not realistic in the 21st century and all of that. There's all of this stuff, right? But I beg to differ. I think that there actually is some evidence that may be not just realistic. In many respects, it's actually de facto true, because there's a smaller.
So because that is the inceldom versus abstinence, and why we're quibbling over the semantics, right? It's like,
right.
If you're an if you're abstinent, bro.
Right.
Abstinence will never work. It's like, bro, you've been abstinent a long time.
Yes. Now, and the reason I think that it's a realistic solution is when you look at how bad things have gotten, how bad the dating market is, and what the options are. So if one of the options is, okay, well, you can pump and dump. Well, pump and dump means that you're running around, you're still prioritizing the peace leave, as it were. You're still pedestalizing it because you're still you're searching for a certain kind of low quality woman that would allow herself to be susceptible to pump and dump. You're spinning plates so that you can always have access when you want to have access. You're doing all of these things that that are not, working on you, that are not bettering you, that are not benefiting your bank account, right? CGA talks about, investing in, he says, rather than investing in, the stock market or in cryptocurrency when it was hot, or, getting those, rental properties together, or whatever else it was that was your strategy. Instead of that, you were investing in the peace leave, as it were. Now, in that context, he's talking about marriage, and and then he gets into the marriage wheel and everything like that. But to the point, chasing around something that is not going to be a permanent thing for you, something that's going to produce results in the future, something that's going to be around for a long time, is just totally and completely just wasted energy. So is that better, or is abstinence a better option, especially for Black men? I mean, you got all these brothers, passport bros. I mean, is it what is the I mean, it's a lot of expense involved in all of this stuff that people are doing.
It's kind of interesting because it's almost like I see something about what you said earlier in the way I view the situation. What you said earlier regarding John McWhorter having certain advantages, right? And then he's not seen and then judging. So the way I look at the situation is, yeah, I agree, right? However, this however part that I'm about to say is something I don't say at all, because I'm very individualistic. So I don't go into this however at all, right? So I was just like, I agree. However, I do know that perhaps I have certain advantages in that regard, or blah, 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 blah. Right. And
you may have more of a possibility or a knack to deal with that.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like, it's like that's what I was gonna kind of, it's like, whether I called it by this name or that, it's like, that's kind of how I am anyways. Like, I ain't got time for shit, whatever, like, there's not enough time in the world for me to do the shit that I want to do, like in a few lifetimes, right?
Yeah. So Copto lyrics, I think I'm saying that right, says abstinence just simply can't exist. Only women can do abstinence long term. That's actually false. That's actually not true. I mean, you have monastics, you have celibate priests, there's a long list of men that have been able to do that. Now,
well,
maybe what is this that you're
difference going on here, in the sense that you're talking about this particular, is it the quality? Is it possible? Yes, and you give an example, but the general, is it possible in the general, or is it going to be with priests?
There are case studies that show that it actually has been possible, and the thing is that you don't need everybody to embrace this.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. You don't need like the whole society to say, okay, well, no more sex. Right. That's not what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do need is a critical mass, and a critical mass is not the majority. The critical mass could be 5%, it could be 10%,
and more people making more monk mode channels or whatever, because they're different. Again, they're different. It's either an incel or you do monk mode, or this or that. It's like, increase the coalition, have it be out there, right? And we're represented and thoroughly kind of understood and promoted, if you will, and increase the swelling of the masses that are part of it. Is kind of what you're saying. That's the most one can say about any particular social movement anyways, whether it be a religion or this or that. It's like, oh yeah, I preach Christianity. It's like, well, Christianity will never work because it's like, yeah, it's not good. I know it. I'm preaching Christianity. Yeah, I know it doesn't work. You know what I mean by work. But So anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to an abrupt end because we.
Okay, now hold up, Copto lyrics, because you're saying stuff that I'm not saying. You said it's impossible to expect most Black men to be abstinent. I didn't say anything about most Black men. I didn't say anything about most Black men.
I mean, I anticipated this. That's why I brought the whole quantitative aspect, and you got into the critical mass thing and to elucidate.
Yeah. So, but the issue here is what is a better solution? What is better for Black men?
Okay.
Is it better for black men to be pumping and dumping,
Yes.
or is it better for them to be
This is
abstinent?
very interesting what you're saying in a meta sense, because this is the difference between, because you're doing old school philosophy, right? In other words, you're saying, is it better, kind of thing Socrates and Plato would do, right? Is it better? You're asking that. With the invention of in modernity, more people tend to do this kind of pseudoscientific philosophy where they look at statistics, they look at probabilities rather, right? Will it work, right? Rather than is it better type arguments. And the thing about and we're very, by the way, it is a feature of modernity. We are all steeped in does it work argument. That's what we're kind of used to, by the way. The old school Platonic in the sky, is it better type stuff, people never quite hear that anymore. So they're actually not hearing you say that. And they don't want to engage with the it is better platonically, even though instantiated blah blah blah. You get the point. But
yeah. So check this. He says a better solution is long-term relationships with black women. Okay, so okay, so
he's telling us that's the best. Okay, cool. Well, he's at least he's in the arena, in the old school philosophy arena, and he's saying this is the best.
I'm not opposed to long-term relationships. I'm married. Ike is married. We're both married to black women, right? In the what is it? Diaspora, but women from the diaspora, as it were. So that isn't that is not the point. What we're seeing now is marriage is on the decline. Long-term relationships are on the decline. The dating scene is totally destroyed. And it's just we're in trouble. And I think young people are feeling this far more than we are feeling
it. Yeah, which makes sense.
Far more.
Makes sense.
And I think that D meant to say abstinence. Yeah, there. She just put the comment. She meant to say abstinence is better, not pump and dump is better.
Yeah, I thought D was.
Hey, D.
She was down. She was
advocating for pump and dump.
D is like, hey, I'm down. That's D's marketing department right there. Like,
she's like, D says, I don't care. They not pumping and dumping me. Okay.
White women for everybody. Anyways, with that, we are out. Peace until next time. But don't forget, case closed in Dr. Thunder's channel this Sunday, right? 4 p.m. Eastern time, always.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil lurking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hot are compromising, convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.